most of you have heard regarding the islet of pancreas, right? The alpha cells, the beta cells, the delta cells, and epsilon cells. And what does the cells of the pancreas do? The alpha cells produce the glucagon, okay? And glucagon is primarily involved in breakdown of glycogen in the liver and muscles. And it also causes the glucose level to go up in the blood. While the beta islet cells produce the insulin, and the insulin, the main actions are increase the membrane permeability for glucose in the fat tissue, in the muscles, and in the liver, okay? And the excessive glucose is oxidized in tissues with the help of insulin. It lowers the level of the glucose level in the blood, and it also causes increase in the synthesis of glycogen in liver and muscles. And there is also lowering of protein breakdown, or it has got anabolic effect. So these are the primary physiological functions of the insulin. Then delta cells produce somatostatin and is primarily involved in inhibition of these gastrointestinal hormones. Okay, and the pancreatic polypeptides are produced by the BP cells, which is involved in self-regulation of the pancreatic secretion activities, and the effect is on the hepatic glycogen levels. So these are the major hormones that is produced by the pancreatic islets: the glucagon by the alpha cells, the insulin by the beta cells, and the somatostatin by delta cells. While the glucagon has got hyperglycemic effects by increasing breakdown of glycogen in liver and muscles, and insulin has got anabolic effect by decreasing protein breakdown as well as increased formation of glycogen and uptake of glucose in both adipose tissue, the muscles, and in the fat tissue. So that is the endocrine part of the pancreas. Now we will go on to the anatomy and physiology of the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is otherwise known as the master gland, okay? And that is situated just below the lower part of the brain. It is primarily controlled by two nucleuses in the hypothalamus, the paraventricular nucleus and the supraoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus. And these neurons go towards the posterior pituitary, okay? And there is the blood vessel, the neurohypophyseal venous system that circulates between the hypothalamus and the pituitary, that has got the venous and arterial plexus which carries the hormones. So it has got two parts: the pars nervosa part or the posterior pituitary, and the pars distalis of the adenohypophysis. So this is the anterior pituitary and this is the posterior pituitary. Again, you should know the specific anatomy of pituitary gland, how it is located. The location of the pituitary gland is very important. You have to know that the pituitary gland is situated just above the sphenoid sinus. The sphenoid sinus, the importance is that usually the transsphenoidal surgery, when there is a pituitary mass, you do surgery through this route, okay? You pass through the sphenoid sinus to reach the pituitary gland tumors. So you have to know this particular anatomy and this particular diagram whenever you are attempting your Mrcp exam, and how the pituitary gland is closely related to the optic chiasma, okay? That is the junction of the two optic nerve. And whenever there is a pituitary mass, how the optic nerve is compressed superiorly, that you have to know. Sorry. And on either side of pituitary gland, you have got the third sinus. On the lateral part, you have got the third cranial nerve, the fourth cranial nerve, and the three divisions of the trigeminal nerve. So this anatomical relationship is very important, and you have to be thorough with the location of the pancreatic gland, because several questions come from this area. You have to know regarding the transsphenoidal approach, how an enlarged pituitary can compress the optic chiasma. Again, any lesion of the pituitary or any lesions in the cavernous sinus or a thrombosis in this area can cause compression of the third nerve, fourth nerve, and trigeminal nerve. So this diagram is very important. Just keep it in mind, okay? Again, how the master gland function. So I have got a beautiful diagram. There is a very close, as I have mentioned, there is a very close relationship between the hypothalamus and pituitary. The neurosecretory neurons from the hypothalamus pass towards the posterior pituitary, or have an inhibitory effects on the posterior pituitary, and there is the neurohypophyseal portal venous system that carries the hormone to other parts. The pituitary gland is the source of hormones like TSH, which acts on thyroid gland. Then ACTH, it produces ACTH that has an effect on the adrenal gland. It also produces the prolactin, which is primarily involved in development of the mammary glands and is important for lactation after pregnancy. Again, the pituitary produces the growth hormone, that is involved in bone lengthening and tissue maturation, especially during the developmental phases. Then it produces gonadotropics like follicular stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, which acts on the ovary and testes respectively. Then the posterior pituitary or the neurohypophysis produces the antidiuretic hormone ADH, which acts on the renal tubules and is primarily involved in the water balance in the body. It also produces oxytocin, which causes the smooth muscle contraction during delivery, and it has also got an important part in the development of mammary glands and is important for lactation. So the master gland has got multiple function. There is a specific function for the anterior hypophysis and posterior hypophysis. The anterior part produces the TSH, ACTH, prolactin, growth hormone, FSH, and the posterior part produces the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. So these things are all very important because we will get all type of basic questions from this diagram. Again, we'll have a diagram of all the hormonal axis of the glands involved. So the hypothalamus produces the GnRH. The GnRH causes increased release of luteinizing hormones. It acts on gonads, especially the testes and the ovary. You have the TS basically some hypothalamus, which causes the pituitary release TSH, especially for anterior pituitary. The TSH acts on the thyroid gland and causes increased release of T4 and T3 and is involved in metabolism. Again, estrogen stress on neurohypophysis causes the release of dopamine. The dopamine inhibits the release of the dopamine causes the release of prolactin. The prolactin causes mammary gland development and is primarily involved in lactation. So you know that many dopaminergic drugs like domperidone causes prolactin release and can cause lactation, and many dopamine blocking drugs like antipsychotic drugs can have effect on prolactin. So there are several clinical correlates, but that we will discuss later on. Okay. And again, GSRH or somatostatin is released from the hypothalamus. It is involved in the release of the growth hormone from the pituitary. The growth hormone acts on the liver and bones and is involved in release of IGF-1 and IGF-BP3 and is involved in growth regulation. This part we will discuss in the next part. Next Sunday we will discuss. Okay. Then again, there is a CRH hormone, corticotropin releasing hormone, that is secreted from the hypothalamus, acts on the pituitary to cause release of ACTH. The ACTH acts on the adrenal cortex. It is involved in and has got central has action on the distal nephron and is involved primarily in the balance. And attacks on uterus and involved in parturition and lactation. So multiple pathways are affected by pituitary gland, and you have to know all the pathways and their interrelationship to each other, and all the scenarios will be tested in your exam. So just be familiar with these diagrams. Okay, the neuroanatomy, the importance of the paraventricular nucleus, the importance of the hypophyseal system, everything you have to know. Very commonly tested part. Now we will go on to the anatomy and physiology of the adrenal glands. We all know there is a right adrenal gland and left adrenal gland situated on the upper part of the kidney, a pyramidal-shaped gland. Okay, and if you take the histology, it has got three parts. It is protected by a capsule, and beneath there are three layers: the zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis. And the innermost part is called the medulla. Okay, the best mnemonic to remember this thing is the GFR. Okay, the glomerulosa on the outside, then the fasciculata, and then the reticularis, and inside the adrenal cortex you have the adrenal medulla. And how does these layers are important? The layers are important because they have particular action. The glomerular zone produces the aldosterone. Okay, the aldosterone is primarily involved in sodium metabolism, blood pressure control, and all those things. Then the zona fascicular or the fascicular zone produces the cortisol, and the cortisol is primarily involved in stress regulation, the stress response and all, the BP control and all those things. The zona fasciculata. And then the reticular zone is involved in the production of androgens and the sex hormones. And finally, the adrenal medulla is involved in the release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay, so these three layers you have to know. Which all hormones are produced from each layer you have to know. And there later on how they act and all we will discuss in detail in the coming class in the next Sunday. Okay, but the anatomy I am discussing here for your knowledge. Okay, again this diagram is also very important, very commonly they ask which layer produce which hormone, all those things very commonly asked in the MRC exam.